Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us. This is a webinar to announce and sort of explain a significant expansion to the NADSP eBadge Academy with the launch of badges and a certification based on those badges that are designed for not so much DSPs, but the immediate supervisors of those DSPs, what we call frontline supervisors. So my name is Dan Hermrich. I'm the Director of Certification and Accreditation at the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. And what that really means is I spend a whole lot of time with the eBadge Academy each and every day, sort of monitoring it, overseeing it, maintaining it, and just sort of making sure that things are running smoothly. So we started this eBadge Academy a little over a year and a half ago. And, originally it was all about DSPs. It was a certification process for DSPs. But we always knew that we were going to build on this platform. We were going to expand the badges that we offered. And we've added some DSP badges over the course of those first 18 months. But now we're adding a whole nother kind of badge. We're adding badges again, that are designed for frontline supervisors. We believe pretty strongly at NADSP that to provide quality support, you need three things: knowledge, skills, and values. And values are pretty universal. The same NADSP Code of Ethics applies to both frontline supervisors and direct support professionals. The knowledge and skills, however, are different. The knowledge and skills you need as a DSP are really crucial. The knowledge and skills you need as a frontline supervisor are really crucial. They overlap. There's some things that both groups of professionals need to know. There's some things that both groups of professionals need to be able to do, but they're not the same. There are things you need to know as a frontline supervisor that you may not need to know as a direct support professional. There are things you need to be able to do as a frontline supervisor that aren't really required of a direct support professional in most cases. And so that's why the badges are different, because they represent different skills, a different type of skill. Our DSP badges that are based on skills are based on the CMS core competency areas. This is a set of competencies published by CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And they have 12 competency areas that sort of describe all the different skills that you need to be effective in a direct support role. These competencies are written to be cross-sector, meaning they should apply equally well to any type of human service setting, not just supports for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, but perhaps supports for people with brain injury, supports for people who are aging, behavioral health supports. These same competencies should apply to any of those types of human services, to direct support within any of those types of human services. These are the 11 competency areas that have been identified for frontline supervisors. These are the National Frontline Supervisor Competency Areas. These were published by the University of Minnesota in 2013. And they try to do the same thing for frontline supervisors, to have sort of a comprehensive list of the skills you need to be effective in that frontline supervisor role. Now, you'll notice the first competency area is direct support. And yes, to be an effective frontline supervisor, you need to have a good handle on your direct support skills. There's a whole lot of direct support skills you need to be effective in the frontline supervisor role. There's also additional skills you need beyond direct support. And that's laid out in those other 10 competency areas. When those competencies were published, shortly after that, NADSP did start a previous version of our frontline supervisor certification. It was based on a portfolio assessment. The idea was that you would put together 3 really good examples of your work from 3 different competency areas, and you would send this fairly massive document off to be reviewed. And that process didn't work as well as we hoped. I think part of the problem was it's probably going to take you at least 6 months, if not a year, to put this portfolio together. It really is a massive undertaking. And we know that frontline supervisors are busy people. To take on a project like that seems a little overwhelming in most cases. The same was true of direct support professionals. We had a portfolio-based assessment process, and it just wasn't as popular as we hoped it would be. It wasn't as scalable as we would have liked it to be. Conversations about that are what led us to develop and launch the NADSP eBadge Academy. So these badges, imagine that portfolio, imagine that massive document that showcases your professional skills, and just imagine sort of chopping it up into smaller pieces. E-badges are sometimes called micro-credentials. They represent one particular achievement or one particular skill that someone may have, that a professional might have. And that was the idea, to take the things that were in that portfolio that were important to us, that we were evaluating, and to try to take each of them and turn them into an electronic badge. And the great thing about this is with your portfolio, you would spend, 6 months to a year on that document and then send it off to be reviewed and then get feedback after the fact. After you've already invested a great deal of time in it. With the e-badges, you're submitting each piece separately. So as each submission comes in, it gets reviewed within 3 business days. And, if there is something that's not quite at the level where we can approve it, if there's something that needs to be adjusted, you're going to find out very, very quickly, very early in the process, as opposed to the portfolio where we might not be able to give you that feedback, for quite a while, for many, many months. So all of these competencies, no matter which one you look at, they all have the sort of the same basic structure. They all have a title for each competency area. They all have sort of an introductory sentence or paragraph describing what this competency represents in general. And then you have the bullet points underneath. You have what we call the skill statements. These are the observable, measurable objectives. And each of these skill statements represents a skill that can be used, that is useful in your role as a professional. So this is one of the CMS core competencies. This is a competency for direct support professionals, or as CMS calls them, direct support workers. But the structure is the same in the frontline supervisor competencies, where you have this general description and then the bullet points of skill statements, and it's the bullet points that we tend to focus on in the eBadge Academy, the individual skills. I try to always mention this anytime I talk about the eBadge Academy, because it's something that can lead to a whole lot of misunderstandings if I'm not clear about it. The eBadge Academy is not a training program. It is not a curriculum. There are no videos to watch. There are no tests to take. There's no training content in the eBadge Academy. The eBadge Academy is about certification. It's a certification platform. It replaces that portfolio process that we used to use. And it's primarily based on how you are using your knowledge, skills, and values on the job. It's all about the application. It's about practice rather than theory. Now, training is important. Don't get me wrong. And there are training requirements associated with the NADSP certifications, including this certification for frontline supervisors. So these are the training curricula, the training programs that have been accredited by NADSP specifically for the frontline supervisors of direct support professionals. The first one is the College of Frontline Supervision and Management, which is within the College of Direct Support. If you have access to the College of Direct Support, which is part of Direct Course, which is published by Elsevier, you also should have access to a series of courses called the College of Frontline Supervision and Management. And those courses are accredited for supervisors. They can be used to meet the training requirements for this certification. There's a group in New York called the Training Collaborative for Innovative Leadership. They have a classroom-based program that is accredited. Relias is another online provider, and they have some courses within their library that have been accredited for frontline supervisors by NADSP. They have other courses that have been accredited for DSPs, but there's specific courses within Relias that are accredited specifically for frontline supervisors. Those you can view in Relias which courses those are. And if you're interested, just get in touch with me. I'll have my contact information at the end of the presentation. And I can send you a list of the Relias courses that are accredited by NADSP for supervisors. In the state of Ohio, there's a program called DSPAS that has training for direct support professionals that can lead to certification. And they do have a series of frontline supervisor modules that is also accredited by NADSP. And then NADSP has its own curriculum that we have developed. And it works on a train the trainer model. So it's called Frontline Supervisor from Management to Leadership. And the idea is that NADSP will train the people who are going to present this material within your organization. And then you'll purchase the curriculum, and those people that have been trained will be able to present it locally. They'll be able to use that training curriculum and teach it within your organization. Any of that training is NADSP accredited, whether it comes directly from NADSP or whether it comes from a trainer that we have trained within your organization. Those hours would count. There's also other NADSP training, such as our webinars that count as accredited training. So that might be a nice way to supplement your training hours, to put a few webinars into the mix and view some of our webinars. Hey, like this one, right? You're watching a webinar right now, and this counts. You can document your completion of this webinar. There's a form on our website that you can use to do that. And you can upload that form to the eBadge Academy to get credit for this webinar. So there's good training out there. There's good training out there for DSPs. There's good training out there for frontline supervisors. I think what we tend to see across the country is that training for DSPs and to some extent also for frontline supervisors tends to focus on meeting regulatory requirements, right? You've got those trainings that are required, that are mandatory in your state, in your jurisdiction, whatever that might be. There are trainings you have to do. We're talking about things like OSHA's bloodborne pathogens training that's required. We're talking about probably some kind of fire safety training. We're talking about training on how to report abuse within your state or other jurisdiction. We're talking about usually CPR and first aid training. All these things are important. Don't get me wrong. These are things you need to know in a direct support role, in a frontline supervisor role, certainly. What I like to say is they're necessary but not sufficient. It's vitally important that you know what to do if the building's on fire, right? You need to know what is expected of you in that emergency situation. You need to be able to protect people in those kind of emergency situations. You also need to know what to do in non-emergency situations, right? You need to be able to support people on a more typical day when hopefully the building isn't on fire, right? That's a really important aspect of your work as well. So what we're hoping the eBadge Academy can do, and we're seeing this already with DSPs, we're hoping that the eBadge Academy can provide an incentive for DSPs and their supervisors to go beyond the required training, to seek out training that is accredited, that we know is high quality, and that covers some of those other topics that are not mandatory, that are not required. We also think the eBadge Academy can help people to be aware of their own skill set. Direct support professionals are highly skilled professionals. That's our message when we talk to DSPs all over the country, that you are a highly skilled professional. Many DSPs don't realize how skilled they are. They don't realize all the different professional skills that come into play on the most typical day of direct support. I think the same is true of many frontline supervisors. They often are not aware of how skilled they are, of the skills they bring to the table when they're supervising a team of direct support professionals. And the eBadge Academy can sort of make that very obvious. Each badge represents a skill that you use in your work, a skill that you have. And we want people to be aware of that. We want people to take pride in their professional skills. And then, of course, there's the code of ethics, and this is the same code of ethics for DSPs as it is for frontline supervisors. It's an attempt to describe the shared values of our professions. And I think it does a very good job of that. Now, this code of ethics, it was always designed to be a tool. Not just something you frame and hang on the wall, not just something you sign and put in your personnel file. It was always meant to be something that DSPs and their supervisors could refer to when they encountered what we call an ethical dilemma. And you're going to run into ethical dilemmas in direct support, probably on a daily basis. You're going to encounter ethical dilemmas. We want people to reflect on their work, and the code of ethics can be a wonderful tool for that. And we want to help people see the connections between the work they're doing and the language of the code of ethics. And the eBadge Academy, in the nicest possible way, sort of forces that, forces you to think about your work and how the code of ethics applies to your work, and reflect on your work and those situations that you encounter that might be considered an ethical dilemma. And that's actually our very first badge in the eBadge Academy. It's the first badge for DSPs. It's also the first badge for frontline supervisors. The Code of Ethics Commitment Badge. It's just a commitment that you will provide services in line with the NADSP Code of Ethics. And once you have earned that badge by making that commitment, then the whole thing sort of opens up for you. There are two major categories of badges, and this is the same for DSPs and frontline supervisors. There are accredited education badges, and those badges focus on knowledge, and generally it's just about uploading your training records from any of those accredited training programs. So if you've got completed several courses in the College of Frontline Supervision and Management within the College of Direct Support, you can generate a transcript and show those hours and take that transcript probably in a PDF document, upload it to the eBadge Academy, where it will be looked over by one of our reviewers just to make sure everything there is accredited and to make sure the accredited courses do add up to the appropriate number of hours. And if everything checks out, it'll be approved, and you'll know that you have received credit for having at least 25 hours of accredited education. You have met that certification requirement. You'll get a badge for it. What I think is more interesting are the competency-based badges, and those focus on skills and values. And what we do here is we ask you for what's called a testimonial. We ask you for essentially a story, a narrative. Tell us about your work. Tell us about an example of your work in which you used this skill that has been identified in the national competencies. Now, we're going to kind of help you to craft that testimonial by providing 2 prompts. Every badge that is based on a competency, it comes with these 2 prompts. The first prompt is always about skills. It's always about asking for this example of your work in which this skill came into play. And that tends to be pretty straightforward for DSPs, for frontline supervisors. It's a narrative, it's a story. In some ways, it's kind of similar to documenting something, right? Which is something that people in human services do on a very regular basis. The second prompt, though, is going to be tied to values. And typically, it's going to ask for you to make a connection between the example you have provided and the language of the NADSP Code of Ethics. How did the Code of Ethics come into play in this example that you have provided? And that can be a little more challenging. That's very different than the kind of writing someone would do in documentation. So it's different muscles. It's a different mode. You have to kind of change gears between that first prompt and that second prompt. And that can be a little difficult. But of course, with the eBadge Academy, if you struggle with that on your first badge and you struggle with it to the point where maybe we can't approve that very first submission, you're going to find out very, very quickly. And you'll get the feedback to help you sort of recraft and resubmit this testimonial and hopefully get approved on the second attempt. I think maybe an example would help. So this is our DSP Development Badge. This is a badge based on Skill Statement 7B from the National Frontline Supervisor Competencies. Skill Statement 7B is about the supervisor promoting the ongoing competency-based training and development of DSPs by effectively supporting DSPs in creating and updating professional development plans, sharing resources related to best practices, emerging trends, and evidence-based practices. This fits in to the staff supervision training and development competency area for supervisors. All right, so what does that mean? What are we really asking for? Well, we have 2 prompts to guide your crafting of this testimonial statement. We're going to say, first, describe an example in which you work to provide DSPs with an opportunity for true professional development above and beyond mandatory training requirements. So here it is, right? We don't, for this badge, we don't want to hear about how hard you work to make sure everybody's CPR and first aid certification was renewed on time. Again, that's very important. If you're doing that, keep doing that. There's a whole nother badge about regulatory compliance that might be a good story for. This badge, though, is about professional development above and beyond those mandatory requirements. So just give us an example of that. It could be about one particular DSP. It could be about your whole team of DSPs. But how did you help this person or these people to develop professionally under your supervision? The second prompt is the connection to values. And it just asks you to explain the importance of DSP development for the people DSPs support and for the DSPs themselves. So it's the why, right? Why do you do this? Why do you, as a supervisor, make an effort to help DSPs develop as professionals? What comes from that? What benefit is there to the people that those DSPs are supporting? What benefit is there to the DSPs themselves? Just explain that. Explain what you're seeing as the benefit in your world as you do this work. And here's what that might look like. This is, a fairly typical testimonial in terms of length. If you put this in a Word document, which is how most of them do come in, it's more than half a page, but probably less than a page, and that's very, very typical. It's broken down into 2 paragraphs. That's very, very typical. The first paragraph relates to the first prompt. Second paragraph relates to the second prompt. And certainly I don't want to read this to you. That would make for really terrible webinar viewing. But the idea is that this supervisor helped the DSP to get involved in a certification program, in a credentialing program at their organization. So this is a kind of a twofer, right? Because you have a DSP that's working on becoming certified through the eBadge Academy. And the supervisor is supporting them with that. And that means finding time. That's probably the biggest challenge, right? Making sure they have time to work on the classes that they need, to develop the skills that they need to have to earn the badges. It does take some support from the supervisor in many cases. But then the supervisor is able to take that work they're doing as a supervisor to support this DSP and apply it toward their own national certification, earn a badge of their own for that supervision work they're doing. So again, they respond to the first prompt, they respond to the second prompt, and that's going to go off to a reviewer. It gets submitted, goes off to a reviewer. The reviewer gets an email that says, hey, you have a new submission to review. And our reviewers are all human service professionals. They're all people working in human services. You know what that's like, right? You can't always deal with the email right away. So you may hear back very quickly in some cases. You might have happened to submit at a moment where the reviewer it happened to go to had some time to just immediately look at your submission and review it right away. It's also possible, that your reviewer is covering a shift somewhere, that your reviewer is in a meeting, that your reviewer is in, a day-long training. We ask our reviewers to respond to each submission within a window of 3 business days. So in some cases, it may happen very quickly. In some cases, it may take longer. It should always be reviewed within 3 business days. And this is what the reviewer is going to be asking themselves. These 4 questions. Does it actually demonstrate the skill statement? Did they address the first prompt? Did they address the second prompt? And is everything in this submission consistent with the Code of Ethics? And then we say specifically, including the tenet on confidentiality. We don't want any identifying information in your submission. Change the names and let us know that you're changing the names. Say something like, we'll call him Bob. And do that whether you're talking about a direct support professional or someone who is receiving services from that direct support professional. Just change everybody's name. All right, so I want to do this fairly quickly, but I want to take you through the certification requirements. There are 16 separate certification requirements to earn the Frontline Supervisor certification from NADSP. All 16 requirements are represented by badges. In some cases, there's more than one badge that can meet the requirement. So this is broken down into kind of 3 sections to go through all 16. So we'll start with this first group here. You have to have the Code of Ethics commitment, of course. You've got to have that badge first. You need 25 hours of accredited training. You need to have a transcript that you can upload that shows you have at least 25 hours of training that's been accredited for supervisors by NADSP. And then you need to show your skills in direct support. Remember that very first frontline supervisor competency was in direct support. So we have 4 DSP competencies where you need to have at least one badge that comes from that competency area. So crisis prevention and intervention, any one of these 3 badges, self-reflection, crisis documentation, or crisis intervention would meet that requirement. The safety competency for DSPs, there's 4 options there: first aid, community safety, abuse reporting, abuse prevention. Any of those badges would meet that requirement. In person-centered practices, there's 6 options. Any of these 6 badges would meet this requirement: individual activities, participant-directed, plan implementation, completing documentation, managing documentation, or person-centered thinking. For health and wellness as a DSP, you have 4 options: supporting well-being, personal care, med administration, and ongoing health support. All right, so that's the first set. And now we're going to get into the other frontline supervisor competencies beyond direct support, those additional 10 competencies that are strictly for frontline supervisors. Now you'll notice the first one's called health, wellness, and safety, which is kind of similar to 2 of those DSP competencies. But as a supervisor, you have additional responsibilities toward health, wellness, and safety. So we have 2 badges in this category, promoting health and managing risk. There'll be 2 badges in each of these supervisor categories, 2 options. For participant support plan development, monitoring, and assessment, you would need either the discovery badge or the team approach badge. For facilitating community inclusion across the lifespan, for that competency, you would need either the community inclusion badge or the community resources badge. For promoting professional relations and teamwork, you would need the team meetings or the Empower DSPs badge. For staff recruitment, selection, and hiring, either the recruiting DSPs or the hiring DSPs badge. And this is the final set, the final 5 competency areas. You would need either DSP orientation or DSP development. DSP development was that example we saw earlier. This is from staff supervision, training, and development. For service management and quality assurance, either policy writer or compliance. If you want to tell the story about how hard you work to make sure everyone had their mandatory training done, that might be a good submission for the compliance badge. It wouldn't really fit DSP development, but it might fit in with compliance pretty well. For advocacy and public relations, either promoting self-advocacy or the public relations badge. And for leadership, professionalism, and self-development, either conflict management or workload management. Those are the 2 options there. And finally, for cultural awareness and responsiveness, either the listening and adapting badge or the representation badge. Okay, so to wrap up the slideshow, I just want to hit some points one more time. That remember, this is not a training program, it's a certification program. Remember, it focuses on application. We're trying to verify that the training you have received is actually being used on the job. That's key. Remember that DSPs are highly skilled professionals. Remember that supervisors are highly skilled as well, but the skills aren't exactly the same. It's 2 different sets of skills, 2 different sets of competencies. So what I'd like to do now is bring up the eBadge Academy and just show you what this looks like in the system. All right, so here we are. This is the NADSP eBadge Academy. This is what it looks like when you first log in. I am logged into a test account. And this test account is actually the one I use to test the Frontline Supervisor certification. So this particular account has earned the certification. That's why they have an FLS badge. They also have earned, obviously, to get that, many of the Frontline Supervisor badges. But if you're, still at the beginning of the process, you'd go to the catalog. The second item in the catalog is a course called NADSP Certifications for Frontline Supervisors. And it's called a course, but it's not really what you would think of as a course. It's really just a checklist. So there's some introductory language explaining, what this whole thing is about, this national certification. And then it lists the requirements at the top, but then below that, every requirement has a little checkbox. There's a list of the requirements. Each one has a checkbox. This checkbox checks when the requirement has been met. And eventually, when all the checkboxes are checked, you can come to the bottom here and open your certificate, and print a copy, save a copy, whatever you'd like to do at that point. Each of these that are a competency area that's required, you can click on the link and look at the options, look at the various badges that would meet that requirement. For this particular account, they have earned the abuse prevention badge, which met the requirement. They didn't earn any of the other badges, but that's fine, because as long as you have one of those four, the safety requirement will check. Same is true for the other DSP competencies. The same is true of the Frontline Supervisor competencies. You can click on the competency area and view a page that has the available badges in that competency area. Now, in this case, this account has earned both of these, community resources and community inclusion. They don't have to do that. Either one would meet the requirement. And then, when every requirement is met, you have access to your certificate. And you can save a copy, print a copy, frame a copy, show it to your organization. We have a lot of really great organizations participating in the eBadge Academy that really do a great job of publicizing, especially on social media, when a DSP has earned a national certification at their organization. It's something that's really celebrated, as it should be. And we hope the same is true for Frontline Supervisors. We hope that Frontline Supervisors will be celebrated as they earn this certificate. Real quickly, let me show you what this looks like. Let's say I wanted to earn promoting self-advocacy. All the information about the badge is here on this page. The prompts are right down here at the bottom. Now, you do have to enter a supervisor code in order to access the submission assignment. So let me handle that real quick. All right, it's taken care of now. Sorry about that. I paused the video real quick because I didn't want to type the code on the webinar, because then everyone would have the code. That code is given to your organization, and then they are able to distribute it to their supervisors. That's just our way of making sure that it is supervisors who are pursuing these badges, that you really are a supervisor. But once that's unlocked, you can go into submission, select a new submission, and then it's the same process with all of these. There's just this box with the blue arrow, and if you have typed up your testimonial in a Word document, you're just going to drag that Word document into the box with a blue arrow, and it will upload. And when it's finished uploading, you'll hit submit. If you would rather not type it up, if you would prefer to maybe speak into your smartphone and record an audio file of you telling this story and responding to the two prompts verbally, That's fine too. We also accept MP3 files and also WAV files. So if you can get an audio file, one of those two types of audio files that has your testimonial, you can drag that into the box with the blue arrow as well. And a reviewer will listen to your submission and review it that way. That's an option. So that's kind of the process. That's the eBadge Academy. So I hope this has been informative. I hope those of you that are supervisors that have access to the eBadge Academy will consider pursuing this certification. If you're an organization with an organization that has not contracted with us for the eBadge Academy and you're interested in doing that, here is where you can get some more information. You can contact me via email with any questions. There's information on our website. And that badge catalog I showed you, if you want to go through and look at that, it's not actually behind the paywall. You can look at the available badges without having an account. You just can't pursue the badges. You can't apply for the badges. But if you'd like to look through them, you can just follow this link. It's ebadge.nadsp.org/catalog. And that URL address will get you to the catalog. So please take a look. Please reach out if you have any questions or if you wish to get started with the eBadge Academy at your organization. Thank you very much.